On today's show of the Nashville Wellness Collective podcast, we have Dr. Jessica Turnbull, pediatrician who is here to shock us with some eye-opening stats and revelations in the child healthcare industry. I am your host, Unique Cortez. The Nashville Wellness Collective is an online directory and resource with a large list of health and wellness practitioners in the Nashville area that span from Eastern to Western practices and everything in between. So whatever kind of practitioner you are looking for or interested in learning more about, the Nashville Wellness Collective is here to help. Visit us at thenashvillewellnesscollective.com and watch or listen to all of our podcast episodes, read our blogs, and more. Whatever part of your health and wellness journey you are on, the Nashville Wellness Collective has you covered from east to west. Go ahead and tap that like button and leave us a rating, as it really helps the channel out. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. At what age does the human brain stop developing? And should we raise the legal drinking limit? Let's dive in. Without further ado, I give you Dr. Jessica Turnbull. Welcome, Dr. Turnbull. Thank you for being on the show with us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. So you and I met, or we know each other through a mutual friend, actually a friend of mine, a coworker of yours. And I was telling her all about this new podcast, the Nashville Wellness Collective, and how I'm trying to interview people that are involved in health and wellness and under the umbrella of Eastern to Western modalities, all of it, and like-minded people that think, you know, every person has a unique journey in their health and wellness, and they have the right to be educated and learn about all of the different things and make an informed decision concerning their health from there. So she immediately was like, oh my goodness, Dr. Turnbull, like, you need to have her on your podcast. And so she told me she's a pediatrician, and I was like, excellent. And then she went on to tell me, you know, yeah, it's really important, pediatric care. And she said, did you know that in the past few years, it's been shown that pediatric care is on a decline, meaning that less and less people find it important to prioritize taking their children to see their doctors, to see pediatricians. And I was astounded by that. And I immediately said, I was like, girl, that is crazy. I was like, because if you go back to the fundamentals of the Bible, like, let's just take it all the way back home to the good book. It says, give me the first 7 years of the boy and I will give you the man. And I was like, that is profound. Like, how important and how they're developing at that age. Like, it is so, so, so important. I mean, even the good book says it. And so I just wanted to ask you, how important is that? Can you tell us a little bit more on the importance of pediatric care?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me and asking this question. And your audience might think I'm a little bit biased. They're like, well, of course she's going to say that pediatric care is important. She's a pediatrician. But it really, truly is. So I work in a specific field of pediatrics where I work in the intensive care unit. So I take care of the sickest of the sick. And what I can say is, when kids have a good foundation with their health, when they're growing up in their earliest years, should they get so sick to have to come to see me, their outcomes are so much better. And if you think about it, you know, you have this baby and you're in charge of helping this baby who is helpless. Like, they can't make any decisions for themselves. They don't have jobs. They can't drive. They can't go do things for themselves, right? And everything that you do for that child sets them up for success, not just in that moment, but for the rest of their childhood, but then for the rest of their lives. So being able to be at your best, highest state of health through childhood just sets you up for success for the rest of your life. And so that's really the reason why routine checks with your pediatrician, even if your kid's healthy, are of the most paramount importance.
Yeah. So you're telling us about, you know, why it is so important, but can you dive into what parts of their bodies, brains, etc., are developing, and up to what age do the different things develop?
Yeah. So probably the biggest developmental change that we see in childhood is when kids start going through puberty. We know that girls are going through puberty at a younger age than they used to.
Okay.
There's a lot of conjecture of why that may be. Boys are going through puberty at about the same age that they have been through history, but it really kind of speaks to even those most natural periods of childhood are changing. And one of the reasons to stay keyed in with your pediatrician is as we learn more about like how puberty is changing, you want to be on the front end of that, because if there's something going wrong with your kids as they're growing up, and then they hit that milestone where their hormones start changing and they start really developing the physiology of being adults, you want to have a trusted medical professional who can make sure you have the best information to help you take care of your kids through that transition. And then the preteen and teenage years.
Oh gosh.
Bless their hearts. You know, you can tell from my accent that I am not Southern, but I have picked up a bless your heart here and there. Because those are trying times for everybody involved. It's trying for the kids, it's trying for the parents, it's trying for the school, it's trying for their friends, and any support that we can give our families and patients going through that 5-8 year process is really just more eggs in the basket of setting the kids up for success later in life. And then as they get into their young adult years, they get into their, you know, teenage years, early adult years. That's where we really start to have our kids make medical decisions for themselves. And so having continuous conversations with your pediatrician and healthcare team through that growing process then sets them up to make good health decisions when they're magically 18 years old and all of a sudden they're legal adults and we have to listen to what they say, right? Which meanwhile, we're like, they're still children, but legally they're out in the world. And so being able to have good health behaviors throughout that time is important. And, you know, it is interesting. So we've learned a lot about brain development in the past few years. And it used to be that we thought, well, from about 14 years on, kids can make decisions that approximate the decisions that adults make. Now we know through functional MRIs, so very high-tech MRI machines, the two big parts of the brain develop at different trajectories, which explains the chaos of the teenage years. So the two big parts of the brain are the very basic kind of limbic system that controls our emotions and our fight and flight and our, you know, fawn and freeze, and those very basic actions that have just kept us alive for this long. So that's the limbic system. The other part of the brain is the prefrontal cortex. So like the decision-making part of the brain, the should I really take that hill at 70 miles an hour? No, that's probably not a good speed to take that hill. That's the prefrontal cortex. Well, through the preteen teenage years, that limbic system, the emotional part of the brain, is physically larger than the decision-making part of the brain. So then once you know that, you're just like, oh, little buddy who's having a total meltdown during, you know, her first period or whatever. It's literally because the emotional part of her brain is bigger than the logical part of her brain. And so then that can help us understand, oh, that's why you're acting the way that you're acting. Then interestingly, that decision-making part of the brain, we now know, reaches full maturity in girls in their late 20s, and it doesn't reach maturity for boys until their early 30s. Then when you think of our kids growing up and we're releasing them out into the world at the age of 18, but then we're like, why are they still making the decisions that they're making through their 20s? It's because it's part of the normal development process. Like nothing wrong is happening.
Oh my gosh.
And if you have a trusted pediatrician that takes care of the kids all through their early 20s, then you have that trusted guided source to help you say, is something wrong happening? Or is this like, no, that's just normal kid stuff and you guys are going to be fine, you know?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I know.
So many questions because the brain development, that just blew my mind.
Oh, I questioned my entire dating history when I learned that. I was like, yeah.
That blows my mind and makes so much sense now. Like the pieces are coming together. I think like when I start dating someone and have success, I will come back and be like, look, she was right.
Science.
Science helped. Thank you, Dr. Turnbull. So, oh my gosh, I still have my sunglasses on.
They look super cute.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
So my next question in regards to that, okay, this is maybe a little bit off topic, but the mind and the brain is still developing. So 21 is the legal, so at 18, we could buy cigarettes.
You can go to war.
We can go to war. At 21, we can drink alcohol. I mean, so please, public announcement, service announcement to people and drinking alcohol. And that's the age when we go buck wild. And so what are we doing to ourselves? And what are we doing to our brains that are still growing and developing?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Spoiler alert, we now have a lot of data that says no amount of alcohol is okay.
Yeah.
It turns out the data that came out, 15 years ago maybe, where it's like, oh, red wine's good for your heart and everything. Turns out it was funded by like the grape industry.
The winemakers.
Yeah. And then if you think, young people drinking at an age where the emotional part of their brain is already normally running the show. I mean, I don't know many people who get less emotional after they drink. Right. Yeah. So.
And that's when things get out of control and get crazy and cops get called.
Well, and that's the thing. At that age, the repercussions are so much more, right? When the kids are still under your roof and they do something untoward, I mean, hopefully not hosting a kegger or anything like that, but the repercussions are generally small. Like they're not going to hurt anybody else seriously. They have you to kind of pick them up and dust them off and take care of them and teach them the right way. Once you get into those teenage, young adult years, the repercussions are so much greater. And strong work, good parents. Parenting's hard. It's really hard.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm so grateful that we do have so many good parents who are doing their absolute best job raising their kid. Gives me faith for the future.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's still blowing my mind about the brain developing still into adulthood. And it makes so much sense now because I do think of like, oh my gosh, once I crossed like 30, I felt like my life started. And so like female, that explains why like the decision making was there. It was better. I was implementing the things that I had learned all my life. More so in my 30s than any other part of my life. And so that leads me to my next question, because I feel as a society lately, there's been a lot of this gentle parenting technique happening, which I've noticed. And I don't have kids of my own, so I don't really have an opinion. I mean, I do have an opinion, but it's like I can't apply it.
Right.
So I'm not sure like what works, what doesn't. But I've noticed like at the park, where a kid's about to jump down from a really high platform and the parent will say, whoa, 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 what do you think is the safest way down? And I'm thinking like, I would have just told the child, no, don't. No, that's not safe. go down this way. I wouldn't have asked the question. I would have just been like, it's a no.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on gentle parenting now that we know everything you've said about the brain development?
You know, I certainly think there is a spectrum of gentle parenting. And I do deeply feel there is room for us teaching our kids how to recognize their emotions. Brene Brown, who is a social health researcher in Texas, did a study with her graduate students. So like 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, right? Over years, thousands of students. And the average number of emotions that they could identify was 3: angry, sad, happy. We know there are more emotions than that, right? When my limbic system was outweighing my prefrontal cortex, I feel like I felt all of them.
Yeah,
but
same.
but we're not raised with a vocabulary of what our emotions are. And so I think that's huge. A huge part of gentle parenting is teaching your kid that you have all sorts of emotions and all emotions are okay. Because if we don't grow up hearing, it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be scared, then we grow up thinking that whenever we feel angry or sad or scared, that it's dangerous and it's not okay. And then that's how you get a bunch of repressed emotions and nowhere to put that energy. And then we just end up feeling lousy all the time and beating ourselves up if we're not happy 100% of the time. So I do think part of gentle parenting, teaching our kids the vocabulary of their emotions and teaching them how to process their emotions is huge. I do worry about what do you think the safest way to go down the slide is? Because I just don't see kids' brains development being able to figure that out yet, right? And so I guess my cautionary tale would be, by all means, go ahead and try to get your kid to reason why they should climb down the slide or slide down the slide and not jump off the slide. But don't get super frustrated with yourself or your child if they don't get it. Because that prefrontal cortex isn't going to be ready to go until their late 20s, early 30s. Yeah.
Ooh, my gosh. Okay, that was huge. But thank you. Yeah, so bringing that into perspective, I think will change an approach and like, okay, understanding that things are still moving around in there.
Yeah.
So you work in the ICU. So do you mind telling us what you see on a daily basis? I guess without being too graphic, because we know intensive care can be triggering. It can be.
It can be. Yeah, and you know, I'm very lucky because a lot of people don't even know that pediatric intensive care units exist because the kids grow up healthy and their kids don't even get admitted to the hospital, let alone have to go to an intensive care unit. So when I tell people that I work in a pediatric ICU, they're like, oh, like with the premature babies? And I'm like, but not in the way you're thinking. Oh, like in the emergency room? No, totally different than the emergency room. It's kind of cool that people don't know what pediatric intensive care units are. But for the uninitiated, kids who get admitted to pediatric intensive care units, for the most part, are either too sick to breathe on their own, so we have to use machines to breathe for them, or they're so sick for some reason that they're in danger of having their blood pressure drop too low. And if your blood pressure drops too low, you sustain brain damage and your heart stops, and then that doesn't lead to a good outcome. So the sorts of kids who can find themselves in that situation are kids with overwhelming infections. The respiratory viruses this year are just knocking out previously healthy kids. I mean, so if you have a kid with some underlying lung issues already, the respiratory season has been really rough. But even for the previously healthy kids, the respiratory virus and bacterial pneumonia season has been really rough this year. Accidents and traumas like car crashes, ATV crashes, house fires, we see a lot of that. And then kids who have chronic health problems that then have a decompensation in those chronic health problems get so sick that they have to come into the ICU.
Oh, wow. And so I noticed you mentioned a couple of things like the car accidents or fires. which leads me to my next question of, if you could stand on top of a hilltop and like shout out the most important advice, tips that you would give to parents so that hopefully you don't have to see their children in the ICU, what sort of advice would you give?
That is such a good question. So first things first, helmets when they're riding their bikes, when they're on their rollerblades, roller skates, certainly anything motorized, they have to wear helmets. It is so sad when a completely previously healthy kid falls off their bike or gets hit by a car when they're on their bike and they're not wearing a helmet, and then they live with a traumatic brain injury for the rest of their lives. And a helmet could have either prevented that brain injury or could have seriously mitigated it. So helmets are huge. Again, not from the South, but being in the South, this is probably going to get some people adding at me. You shouldn't let your kids ride ATVs. You really shouldn't. And it has to do with that decision-making part of their brain. You know, kids will ride an ATV and they're having so much fun that they're going to take a turn really sharp, not thinking through the mechanics of it. And then the ATV turns and lands on them. And then they have traumatic brain injuries. And the parents whose kids come in with ATV accidents, they're always just so surprised because it's like they've rode ATVs before and they've never gotten hurt. And it's like, yeah, but that decision-making part of their brain isn't mature enough yet. So they're going to take risks. So I would say not to have ATVs. If you're going to own guns, store them empty, store the ammunition remotely from the gun, have gun locks. And again, yes, we are in the South and there are families who grow up eating what they kill, you know? Well, we killed this deer and we eat from it for a season. Please don't let your kids keep guns in their rooms. Even if you give your kid a gun for a holiday, do not let them keep it in their room. Do not keep it with the ammunition in it. Do not keep it without a gun lock, because that very emotional part of their brain is running the show for years, and you don't want kids to have access to something deadly when they're being age appropriately over emotional about something, because then you can have repercussions that you can't fix. Follow up with your pediatrician to make sure if your child is going to develop asthma or diabetes or anything, that you've got that under really, really good control. If the world intervenes and then your kid gets sick in a way that you can't control, at least they've got their chronic health problems under control. Please wash your hands. Douse everybody in Purell. That's what's going to work for the viruses that are going around this year. And then it's not a bad idea to wear a mask when you're sick. That way you don't get other people sick. I would be remiss if I didn't say get vaccinated for all the things. I think parents have such wonderful access to information about vaccines now. The good thing about that is then our pediatricians are really well versed at helping families who are hesitant to get vaccines for their children. Our pediatricians are really well versed in walking down that path with them and helping make the best decisions for their kids. So get vaccines. Please don't let your kids throw gasoline on bonfires. That's another thing where they may have done it all growing up. But one throw of gasoline on a bonfire and the kid doesn't run away fast enough, and then they end up in the intensive care unit with burns. Oh, God. And so I feel like I'm like the fun killer standing on the top of this hill. But I think the take home message is for kids who are in the ICU who have had either vaccine preventable disease or have a traumatic brain injury from an ATV accident or are burned because of a bonfire. Like, if you ask those parents, no amount of protection would have been too conservative
Yeah.
had they known what would happen.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I'm sure you see it all. And I'm sure the guilt that maybe parents start to feel immediately when they see their child, the repercussions of what happened.
I mean, parental guilt is so huge anyway, right?
Yeah.
You're very, like, you can't win for losing when you're a parent.
There's no handbook.
Right. I know. They don't send the babies home with them from the hospital. I know.
What page is this on?
Exactly. And then, Google can just take you down all sorts of rabbit trails that you shouldn't. And so it just comes when parenting is so hard anyway.
Yeah.
Just do what you can to protect yourself from optional harm. You know what I mean?
Take all little steps. Have like a little checklist of, okay, at least I can do these things and rest assured knowing that I did those things.
Yes.
Took precautions.
Yes.
So you mentioned brain trauma and different ways that people end up in the ICU because of that. In the ICU, what can be done for brain trauma? What sort of modalities are used to help with that? Have you seen things that work or things that maybe just help?
By the time a kid gets to us with their traumatic brain injury, really the only thing that we can do is prevent subsequent injury. Because if you think about it, the initial damage to the brain happens on impact. The only way we can prevent that is by preventing the impact, preventing the car crash, preventing the bike wreck, whatever. By the time the kids get into the intensive care unit, our job is treating salvageable brain. What parts of the brain aren't irreversibly damaged, but they're a little bit damaged, but they can still heal up. That's everything we're doing in the intensive care unit, is trying to get those other parts of the brain to heal up. So we'll have kids on ventilators. We'll give them different medicines through their IVs to help reduce the swelling of the brain. We might use different medicines to kind of change the amount of blood flow that's going to their brain, because the right amount of blood flow will help get nutrients and things that can heal the brain to the damaged brain tissue, while clearing out all of the toxins and all of the inflammatory things that happen with the brain. But then too much blood up in the brain can increase the pressure in the brain. So that's something that we do. We might empirically treat for seizures, because anytime the brain is using energy that it doesn't have to use, that's energy that it can't use to heal. So sometimes we'll have kids on seizure medicines when they have traumatic brain injuries. And then once they get out of that period, which can take sometimes weeks before all of that's done, then it becomes inpatient rehabilitation's job to help the kids learn how to walk again, learn how to use their arms again, learn how to eat again, talk again. Every once in a while, our kids have such traumatic brain injuries that they can't breathe on their own and can't come off the ventilator safely. So that's when we have to talk about things like tracheostomies and being on a ventilator for parts of the day, and then having a G-tube where you create a hole in the wall of the stomach to deliver formula, because the kids aren't able to eat on their own. And that's like that's months down the road once you've had a traumatic brain injury. It can be a really, really long road.
Oh my gosh. Wow. And you mentioned things that we can do to monitor or be aware of. You said asthma or diabetes. What are some signs? Is that mostly genetic, or what are some signs parents should be looking for that are indicators of, oh, hey, maybe my child has asthma, or maybe this is diabetes? I'm not sure.
So asthma, the kids that wheeze with every change in season, ask your pediatrician about asthma. The kids where viruses just seem to hold on longer. Like their sibling cleared the virus in like 4 days, but this one, like the coughing seems to last weeks. Go get checked out for asthma. The kids who just get virus after virus after virus after virus, go get checked out for asthma, because it might be that their lungs are just naturally a bit sensitive from the asthma, and so then they can't clear the viruses that they're having. For diabetes, the big ones are drinking a lot and peeing a lot.
Okay.
And when I say peeing a lot, like a previously potty trained kid will start wetting the bed at night.
Oh,
That's an indicator that they might have diabetes. Okay. One of the things that we're seeing a lot of in kids right now is high blood pressure. And so seeing your pediatrician to get blood pressure checked on a regular basis is really important, because even in adults, we know that high blood pressure that just goes on for years and years and years starts to damage your organs. And so if that's happening when they're kids, we've got to get that under control so they can grow up and live healthy lives. What are the other things that people should be watching for? Oh my gosh, mood. Our kids have levels of anxiety and depression not seen before in history.
Wow.
There's lots of theories as to why. I think the pandemic magnified it, but I think the kids that were just having debilitating depression and anxiety, it was going up before the pandemic happened.
Wow.
And so even just going to your pediatrician to have standardized yes and no questions about their mood can help give you an indication if your kid is developing depression or anxiety that's going to be a problem. Wow. And that is, of course, really important to catch early, because one of the other things we see in the intensive care unit is kids who have committed suicide. And that's just the ultimate. They seemed fine, and then they broke up a relationship or got in trouble for something.
Wow.
And their lovely, lovely families are going, we didn't see any signs.
Yeah.
Maybe there weren't, but following up the pediatrician and just getting the regular standard, we do this for every kid screening, maybe would have helped see that the kid was having trouble before something so catastrophic happened.
Yeah, because I feel like you guys as doctors and seeing so many kids day in, day out, like even if the kid tried to lie on one of those tests, I feel like you would know.
Yeah.
Like
the standardized measures checking for anxiety and depression have been used for decades.
Yeah.
They're if a kid lies on it, you can tell on the test that they're lying, which then gives you are you lying because this is a joke and it's fun? Or are you lying because maybe something really scary is going on? So even just having that test to precipitate a conversation with the physician, it would be huge.
That's crazy. Sorry, I had another question.
That's okay.
Let me go back in my mind palace. So we were talking about depression. Oh, and then you, in part of your answer, you mentioned that there's different theories as to why, and then you like briefly or briskly went over COVID has a little bit something to do with it. Perhaps that time of isolation could have been a factor, but you also said there were other theories. Are we allowed to discuss some of those?
Social media.
Social media?
If you look at just historically, when social media became widespread, it looks like that's when mental health issues started becoming more widespread.
Bullying.
Oh, 100%. Like when I was little, I knew exactly who the bullies were because they were saying things to my face, right? Yeah. And then they got a little bit smarter and they started saying things behind my back, but I could still trace it back to who said it. Now, kids are growing up with it coming from all angles. And then I also think there's something about social media, you know, the thing where people on social media show their highlight reels, not their entire lives.
Yeah.
I think a lot of kids are looking at social media going, well, look at everybody else's great life. Yeah. And mine is either not that great or boring or really, really bad. And then it drives this compare and despair that when you don't have a fully formed decision-making prefrontal cortex, you don't have the brain situation to be like, oh, well, yeah, but that social media feed is completely curated. They probably took 20 different pictures just to get that one. They probably have makeup artists and hair artists and filters and blah, 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 blah. And I think I worry that parents beat themselves up because they can be like, I tell my kids that. I tell them that social media isn't real life. But just because you tell them doesn't mean they can actually understand it.
Yeah.
They just see this disparity and they feel less than, which in some kids it makes them depressed and in some kids it makes them anxious. Let's be honest, in some adults it makes them depressed and in some adults it makes them anxious. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
My mental health's better when I take a break from my social media.
That's true. Oh my gosh, it's so hard for me because it is my job.
Right. I know. Right?
So take it from me. Oh my gosh, it's all fake. Like all this shit is fake.
And curated by highly talented individuals who work hard.
We do this for a living.
Yeah.
It's our job to figure out like what you're Google searching, what you're searching on TikTok. Like we research all of it. We know you inside out and all of your traits and what you're into. And we're going to cater exactly to that. We know how to get on your For You page. It's all
Which, by the way, thank you, because some of my favorite products have come to me from my algorithm. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason my skin looks as good as it does right now is because of the algorithm. So thank you.
TikTok shop?
That's fantastic.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I just had to, PSA, put that out there. If there's any younger viewers watching right now, it's a job. People get paid to do this, and we're very strategic about it, and that's it. It's nothing more than that. But thank you for touching on those theories. That makes a lot of sense. Puts things into perspective. Oh, here's a question about peeing.
Yeah.
I interviewed somebody, a nutritionist, personal trainer, who was talking about healthy intake of water and how much water you should be consuming and peeing and the color of pee and what it should look like, and not clear, but and not bright yellow either, but like a light yellow.
Yeah.
And then I asked, because there's people like myself, petite, and my mom that like we pee a lot, or we think I don't know. So I'll ask you, what is peeing too much?
Yeah. Your pee shouldn't be crystal clear. Like there should be a yellow tinge to it. Yeah. So like kind of like dilute lemonade. Yeah.
Okay.
And then when it comes to your kids, how you tackle them and get them to drink enough, I have no idea, because kids just have energy and they just run, right?
Yeah.
So I think for kids, they can't voice like when they're tired or run down or their energy is low or whatever. So if they're having kind of a bit of a whiny moment that doesn't make sense, you can be like, hey, you want something to drink? And then, like water is really, really good for kids. It doesn't have to be very fancy sports drink, and it shouldn't be really high sugar, latte, frappuccino, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, if your kid is like dilute lemonade urine, then they're drinking just fine.
Okay. So, but not too frequently. Like, I think that's, my mom especially is like, oh my gosh, I feel like right after I drink a glass of water, I have to go almost immediately. So would you tell her more so just look at the color of it? Okay.
Yes.
And not worry about.
And if anybody's having trouble holding their urine, then they should see a doctor, because then there might be something anatomical, structural, and not just that she's super well hydrated.
Gotcha.
So,
okay. Okay. Thank you. When you said diabetes and you said, blood pressure. Blood pressure was another one that in that response that caught my attention. I was like,
why are we talking about blood pressure in kids?
Yeah. So do you mind explaining to us that?
Yeah. So kids are growing up in a way that they're getting a lot of adult diagnoses early. And when I think about that, I think high blood pressure and then also obesity. This generation of kids is anticipated to be the first generation of kids that has a lifespan shorter than their parents.
Oh, no.
So something isn't working.
Yeah.
The average lifespan in the US right now, about low 80-year-old. Men are a little bit lower, women are a little bit higher. It's anticipated that our kids are not going to grow to those ages.
Wow.
Because of the chronic disease that they're accumulating now. And high blood pressure and overweight and obesity are two big parts of that.
So what do you think is like
Yeah.
contributing to this? What can we do to help or prevent it? What sort of, sorry, I'm throwing like a million questions at once.
Yeah, that's okay.
What sort of signs should parents also be looking for?
So we have learned that I'm not a good judge of whether a kid is overweight, because when all of the kids around them are overweight, they just look like normal kids. So really the only way to know if your kid is gaining weight in a way that doesn't make sense for how old they are is to get a checkup at the pediatrician and have it plotted on a growth chart.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. The theories abound. A lot of the theories are about the things that we put in foods to preserve foods.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of the artificial dyes have been associated with obesity in mice. So it's like, well, if they make mice obese, then maybe they make, humans obese too. Kids being on screens, not getting out and running around like crazy people, not riding their bikes in the neighborhood until the porch light comes on and getting yelled at to come home.
Yeah.
Kind of all of the different things in the media. Nothing has been one factor that we can pinpoint. I also do wonder, though, if the mental health issues that we're seeing in kids is associated with overweight and obesity, because we know our foods affect our moods.
Yeah.
And if you're eating foods that change your mood in a way that isn't helpful, are those foods also containing chemicals that are obesogens, chemicals that can make you overweight? And then being overweight or obese can certainly be associated with anxiety and depression. And then it just becomes this huge spiral.
Cycle.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, wow.
So if anybody can figure that out, you get a finder's fee. You get 10%. If anybody who listens to your podcast figures this out.
Y'all better write in, leave it in the comments. Oh my gosh, that just blew my mind to think, yeah, I mean, you hear so much on social media, on different platforms of our food, our food that we get at the grocery store. Even just the other day, I saw a TikToker, but he's kind of investigative TikToker. And he went into Whole Foods and was like, I remember when the ingredients on this package were only 3 because it was organic and it was like wholesome and it was just 3 ingredients. And now he's like, look, and he's like showing the ingredient label and it has all of these ingredients that I can't even pronounce. And you always, there's this old adage, if you can't pronounce all the ingredients, don't get it. And Whole Foods has always been known for supposedly looking out for our betterment and screening everything that they put on their shelves to make sure that they come from wholesome places and brands and that they are indeed organic and whole foods. And to see how the ingredient list has grown from like 3 ingredients to 18, again, my mind was blown, and I was like, I believe it though, because I've seen what the grocery stores have been doing over the years and how the ingredients do change. And a lot of times you look at these labels and you're like, I don't even know what half of this stuff is.
But then it's got a health halo, so many grams of fiber on the front, right?
Marketing.
Oh yeah.
There's your marketing.
Yeah. And it's hard because your family must eat only whole, unprocessed food for every single meal of the day.
It's hard.
Like, that's impossible, right? I am not going to negatively judge a parent who gives their child a fruit pouch.
Yeah.
Because you know what? The kid wants a fruit pouch.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to negatively judge that.
No.
The thing that I find very curious, and this is all anecdotal for sure, but the stories of, well, I went and lived in Europe for a month and all of a sudden my inflammatory bowel disease cleared up. Or I went to France for 2 weeks and I ate nothing but cheese and drank wine and I was down 3 pounds when I came home. I'm like, I don't know. There's a there,
just got goose pimples because
yeah. So
I've heard those stories too, and the Mediterranean diet and the blue states, like are they blue cities
blue
or
zones?
Blue zones.
Bigger than cities and zones. States. Zones. Yeah.
And how Greece and other places in the Mediterranean, but having that diet that they seem to live to 100.
And it's not just the diet, it's the social interactions. And you've got these lifestyle, you've got these octogenarians schlepping up like cobblestone hills that I'm like, I would feel unsteady going up that. And you've got this 80-year-old just trucking up. No, I love that Netflix documentary, the Blue Zones documentary. Yeah, it was
I haven't even seen it.
Oh, my gosh, talk about goose pimples. Yeah. Okay. Cancel your plans tonight. You're going to binge it. It's amazing.
Yes. Is it still on Netflix right now? Do you know?
Oh, yeah, probably.
Oh, my gosh. I'm looking that up. Oh, my God.
So
yes.
good. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, you're absolutely right about like cobblestone. And I know I've seen them when I'm like, where's the handrail? And they're like fruit baskets on their head. And
yeah, fruit basket on a head, baby on a hip.
Yes.
I'm like,
I'm still looking for the handrail.
Or I'm looking for a way around the hill. Even if it adds time, if it's flat. Yeah.
Where's the elevator? I did not sign up for this.
Right. Meanwhile, she met our mutual friend in a run club. So don't listen to her. Don't listen to her. She'd truck right up that hill like it was her job.
My running is a shuffle. Like it's just a friendly little.
It's okay. You just shuffle your way right up that hill. It'd be awesome.
Okay, but yeah, so food might be a theory behind as to why. And this is crazy, but making so much sense now when you said like the food and then social media. And then, so like, we don't know exactly what's in the food. We don't know what all those chemicals or unknowns in the food are doing to the brain. And then the brain gets hooked on social media, and then the bullying on social media is happening, and they're seeing all this negativity. So it's like one chemical reaction with another chemical reaction. And then it's just this cycle. And then we're like, oh my gosh, we have depressed children and bad things happen. So that was excellent information for us to be aware of.
Well, and I think the other thing is we will have healthier kids from all of that standpoint when we have healthier parents from that standpoint too. Because the do what I say, not as I do, that does not work. You know, if you're trying to keep your screens away from your kids, but you're flipping through your screen, like their prefrontal cortexes aren't developed yet, but they see that inconsistency, right? And then when parents are able to take care of themselves, they're able to role model those good behaviors for their kids. So then the kids will grow up being healthier adults. And that's the other thing. Like being a parent is so hard that doing something just for yourself, first of all, you feel like you don't have time, you don't have energy, whatnot. Second of all, it just feels selfish. Like, why should I take the time to make myself a beautiful salad when I have to help my kid with his homework, right? The reality is that when you take care of yourself, you take better care of your children because they will role model you. So if for no other reason, cutting down on your screen time, checking in with your own mood, checking in with, oh, maybe I do feel a little bit deranged when I eat the Doritos myself, right? Just taking those little micro movements to make yourself healthier. It's not, first of all, it's not selfish, but if you can't get rid of the thought that it is selfish, then say, you know what, I'm examining this to make myself better so my kids will be better too.
Ooh. I just touched my mic. You just got me so excited, but that was Wait, can you say that again for our audience to hear?
Well, so not just parents, but women and some men. But I think the way parents and women are socialized, it's just our dominant nature to give to others before we take for ourselves, right? And in parents, I mean, that's kind of your job. Like we talked about a little bit ago, you're raising something helpless, right? You do kind of have to give before you receive when you're raising kids. But if you can't get past the thought, it's selfish to do something to take care of my own health, then don't do it for yourself. Do it because taking care of your own health will help your kids be more healthy because they're watching you.
Examining it, like sampling it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, I used to always do that when my mom was like cooking something good, or like there was baked goods around. I'd be like, "Oh, taste tester, hold on, I've got to make sure."
Yep, of course, yes.
So consider yourself like a taste tester.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sampling the goods.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Exactly. Yep.
So when on the topic of taking care of yourself, self-help, this podcast is all about casting or creating an umbrella over Eastern and Western modalities and kind of bringing it all together and coming from this place of realization that we're all on this health journey. We're all here to better ourselves and try to live our best lives, whether it be with some Eastern practices or Western practices or both, because I think that all the practitioners have same common goal in mind is just to help you and better you. On that note, though, when you're talking about self-care, are there any other practices that maybe you practice yourself or that you've seen other people do, like breath work or anything, you know, maybe it's Eastern, maybe it's Western, that you've tried that you suggest to people that you're like, hey, it works?
Well, in my office, I have an infrared spa. It's back. It's back behind the camera. I love the infrared spa. And awesome. Talk about doing something selfish. But that was my Christmas present a couple years ago.
Yay! Good for
from my lovely partner. That was my Christmas present. And I love that thing. I meditate every day.
Look at you.
And I meditate with an app. It's called the Happier app. It used to be the 10% Happier app, but now it's called Happier. And they have meditations from 10 good breaths, and that's it, all the way up to like an hour or even untimed and unguided. And sometimes it's just a 3-minute meditation. But I have generalized anxiety disorder. So I loop and ruminate. And I am really learning how to work on that through meditating.
Excellent.
You might be talking to my acupuncturist on this podcast at some point.
Thank you.
He's amazing. He's at 7 Directions. He's fantastic. He helps me with my anxiety. And then I also started having some arthritis in my right neck. And so he needled that last week and it was glorious. I lift heavy weights. That's the other thing that I do for wellness. Well, you and I talked about how I don't run. I did that in my younger days. I don't do that now. So I lift heavy things.
That's awesome.
The wellness things that I have seen parents do with their kids, parents that teach their kids to breathe, that is amazing because kids can follow those directions. Like box breathing, like breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Like I've seen parents teach their kids that. And it's like, a kid's not going to do that. Dude, a kid's going to do that, especially if that helps them feel better. You know?
Oh, that's amazing.
I've seen child yoga, and it's amazing. Instead of doing the actual shavasana or, you know, whatever the Sanskrit words are, they turn all of the yoga poses into animal words.
That's cute.
It's super cute,
I
right?
love that.
And so, you know, they can do like koala pose or pony pose or whatever. I've seen parents do that with their kids, which is really, really lovely.
I like that.
Yeah. I hope I didn't convey that kids are fragile when I was standing on my metaphorical hilltop saying all the things that kids shouldn't do. No. Because at the end of the day, like running around barefoot and getting dirty and being exposed to all of the different microbes, right? Like that's one of the healthiest things kids can do. And now us adults have put science on it, right? Where it's like, it's not just running around outside, it's forest bathing. And forest bathing is very good for your wellness. And I was like, well, then I was forest bathing when I was 7 years old, like in the middle of Ohio, right? I was just running around getting dirty. So I think we can overcomplicate it. And one of the great things about kids is because they're so free-spirited, they kind of force us to make it simple. And then that's really lovely for us too, right?
Yeah.
Like running around outside barefoot for 10 minutes.
Yes.
Boom, wellness. Great.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. That's so beautiful. Grounding.
Yes.
Get outside in nature.
Yeah.
Get some movement in.
Yeah.
Movement.
It's beautiful out right now.
Yeah.
And if you heard, the lawn guys were just outside cutting the grass, so I could go run around barefoot right now, not trip over anything. It'd be great.
Some fresh cut grass. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Dr. Turnbull, for being with us on the show today. I feel like I asked everything that was on my list, but is there anything that I may have forgotten? Anything you would like to leave our audience with?
I'm happy you're doing this. I think this is lovely.
You. Thank you.
Like, Nashville is such a great city.
Oh my gosh.
And what you're doing is bringing together all of these different wellness resources in one location. I think it's great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you again for being on the show. And I will leave all of Dr. Turnbull's information as far as where you can find her online. I'll leave it in the show notes. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Nashville Wellness Collective. Like, share, and follow us on social media at the Nashville Wellness Collective for exclusive content and giveaways. Thank you again to Dr. Jessica Turnbull. Please give her a follow on Instagram at Burning Bright MD. If you would like to be a guest on the show, please visit us online at the NashvilleWellnessCollective.com. Follow us so you don't miss a single episode. Until next time, the Nashville Wellness Collective has you covered from east to west.